I'm going to let my dog out. I will be right back. Welcome to the folks who have joined in the last minute. Just asking that folks, if they'd like to share, put your name, pronouns, organization in the chat, just so folks can get an idea of who all is here today. And we'll give people maybe another minute to jump in, and then I'm sure others will trickle in, but we can jump in. If you need, there's also closed captions that you can turn on the bottom of your little window where kind of the emojis are and your hand raise and stuff. Let me know if you can't see that on your end. I'm not sure how that works as far as host versus participants. And this meeting will be recorded. At least if we get enough folks, we'll probably split into breakout rooms. So the breakout rooms won't be recorded, but otherwise this conversation and these presentations will be recorded. So you're welcome to share that out. It'll be in our toolkit, as well as whatever notes and other resources, and this slide deck will be shared as well. Okay, well, we can go ahead and kind of jump in, get moving. Yeah, thanks everybody for being here. I'm excited about this conversation. I think it's super relevant for anybody working in the homelessness services world right now, especially in Colorado. I think even just recently, there's been new communities who have implemented camping restrictions or camping bans. So I'm excited to hear how you all are navigating this work. So as folks roll in, if you haven't already, please put your name, your organization in the chat. And for those of you who have not been part of this kind of meeting before, we start with doing a couple of organization HRP grantee presentations who work around this topic, which is the camping restrictions, camping bans. And then we'll just kind of open it up to have a peer conversation. Depending on how many folks are here, we might split out into breakout rooms. But really it's just a chance to connect and learn from each other and share kind of how you're navigating this work. So I'm excited to hear what all your thoughts are. So we'll have a couple of presentations. There'll be time at the end of both for just a few questions. So when the presenters kind of prompt that or you know, they kind of get to the end of their presentation, feel free to use the hand raise or the chat function. And Molly and Kathleen, you can also kind of just facilitate those questions. And then just keep your mind open about how you are navigating this work, so we can kind of share afterwards. With that, I will send it over to Molly. Oh, actually, I forgot I had this slide in here. This is just a check-in. Throw it in the chat. How are you feeling today? Just feeling great, not good at all. Just whatever inflated or deflated duck speaks to you today. And I'll move on to the next slide, but yeah, just getting a pulse check. Okay.
I think my duck is number 6. Hey, everybody. So I am Molly East, and I am the Executive Director of Focus Reentry up in Boulder. We are a reentry group. So our target population is criminal justice involved, along with those that are experiencing homelessness. So it really is trying to tackle, an upstream issue from homelessness because of the way the two are intertwined. So our mission is to promote successful second chances, break the cycle of homelessness, reduce recidivism, and enhance the well-being and safety of our community. And we do that, like I said, primarily in Boulder County. So that includes mountain areas such as Nederland, Ward, Jamestown, and then the cities of Boulder, Longmont, Louisville, Lafayette. So Boulder has a long history of a camping ban. So I'm going to try and keep this very brief because this has been a huge part of Boulder politics for a long time. So there is a lot more to it, but I'm just going to give the brief overview. So Boulder actually passed its first camping ban in 1980. Like many communities, there was kind of this, rise in conservatism. So they passed this initial camping ban. The target population was the unhoused, but it was also the city was known for kind of like, traveling hippies that would come through and kind of take up camps in the summer. So it was designed to address that population as well. Then obviously over time, the unhoused became the target of the camping ban. And in 2021, that ban was expanded to be what we call now the blanket ban. So that specifically states, that nobody shall camp, within a parkway, recreation area, open space. And camping means to reside in a temporary shelter place and conduct like your daily activities. And then the biggest kicker of this camping ban, of course, is in the city of Boulder. That means any cover. So you can't set up a tarp, blanket, netting, cardboard, anything that would cover you besides just a tent. So all of that is considered shelter. You can have only your clothes. And in 2022, that was formally challenged by the ACLU. At the moment, it is being enforced because the case was dismissed. There was a similar ban in a city in Oregon, and SCOTUS ruled in favor of the city. So that gave the city of Boulder, the judges there, the feeling of dismissing it. It sounds like the ACLU is looking at, other appeals down the road. Honestly, I'm not real optimistic given the current Supreme Court and just the climate. So next slide. So the fines for this can be pretty hefty. It can be up to $2,600, 90 days in jail. There's notice and enforcement. So standard is the homeless outreach team gives somebody 72 hours before cleaning up the camp, but they can also enforce immediate removal. So they have done the immediate removal. Recently, there was a pre-Sundance Film Festival that came that I think was kind of a test for the city, and they essentially swept the whole Pearl Street corridor. And it was as if Boulder didn't have any unhoused members of its community if you walked down there during that festival. And then it also can result in like ticketing and arrests, particularly like where communications break down. I think we all know a lot of people camping. There's a lot of, brain injuries, IDD, there's mental health, substance use. People are sleeping, police wake them up. And so communication breakdowns are big for arrest, usually related to the law enforcement interaction. But there's also instances of substances being found in people's camps and different things like that. And then warrants are a huge one. Most people don't make it to court for these citations. So, warrants are also issued quite often. So the unintended consequences of this that we're dealing with, right? So there's the personal consequences. It disrupts somebody's life. You know, they have found a space where they feel stable, whether that's been for a few days or a few months, and now they have to pack that up and move. That's pretty disruptive. I know I hate moving, so I can only imagine how this would feel for a lot of folks. Loss of personal items. We hear all the time about the things they've lost, whether those are, you know, sentimental items that they had left from their family or just things that have become important to them along the way. We hear about that a lot. And then also loss of vital documents, right? And that can include, you know, the docs we all think of for housing. So the ID, social security cards, but also things potentially related to court or if they've had other tickets. I mean, various different things that people need. And when they have to move and pack things up, a lot of these things get lost. And then there is, of course, the you know, legal consequences, right? It's a huge financial burden. I'll be honest, I've never seen anybody get like the full $2,600 fine, but if you're unhoused, $50 is really too much. And most people get more than one of these tickets, right? So it builds up. And then, you know, like I talked about before, there's the additional charges and arrests that oftentimes result from law enforcement going into these camps and warrants. So, you know, people end up in jail over this. And then from the long term, it can be an additional housing barrier, right? Whether that's loss of documents or just an additional charge on their record. That's, you know, one more barrier that we have to go back and put into HMIS. We've also seen instances where it has been loss of housing opportunity. Boulder is incredibly strict on meth. And so we've had instances where somebody in one of these sweeps has had meth in their camp, and so they lost an actual housing opportunity. And then, of course, the result we can all think of, longer terms of homelessness, right? The more of these barriers and loss of opportunity people experience, then the longer they're likely to be unhoused. So how do we engage with folks? So we have 5 peers on our team. They do a lot of different things within the Focus Reentry program, but they all have lived experience in homelessness and or criminal justice. And so they are, throughout the week, they are actively involved in outreach and engagement. And they also, you know, really help us design how to interact if they're not there in like a culturally responsive way with the people that we're interacting with. For example, Eric, our newest peer, explained to us he had a lot of trouble communicating with law enforcement in Boulder, and he felt like it was because he was from Chicago originally and he had a much more like aggressive style of speaking. And that was great feedback. I had never considered, you know, if somebody's from a different city, right? So we use them to really both engage and guide our outreach and engagement. We also really try and stay person-centered, and that comes from both, you know, listening to what people say and then observing. So if someone is camping outside, you know, pets are huge. We all know that. They have their pet with them. That's important and that matters. And, you know, the other thing we hear a lot, couples, they don't like to be divided. They have in their head that it's better for them to camp together than to go to safe temporary shelter. And we try to always stay housing focused solutions, no matter what that looks like. And so when we're communicating the camping ban, it's important to have very clear communication with folks. You can't waver despite any personal feelings that we may have about the ban. It's important to be an advocate, not an ally. If you start going down this trail of, you know, how unfair this is and all of those things, it just derails the whole engagement, right? You really have to stay focused on the message that you're delivering. And we talk about it whether we've engaged someone for the first time or the 100th time, right? We really try and reiterate this with our folks in jail. We have to remind them when you're released, that means it would be much better if you would go to All Roads shelter rather than go back out on the street, because I don't want to see you get rearrested. And then we, of course, opportunity for questions, which the questions are interesting. There's always a lot of, different rumors about the ban. For a long time, people believed, well, I can just go to Nederland and I can camp up there for as long as I want. That is actually not true. We work up in Nederland. So, answering all of those questions and really trying to make sure people have as best a picture as they can of what's going on. And then the biggest piece, offer help, right? So you've been notified on Friday. Can we meet you here Monday and help you move some stuff? How about we get you some bus passes up to All Roads, or we'll even give you a ride if you have too much stuff, whatever that looks like. That really, it helps us build trust with people and then also alleviate some of those unintended consequences. Then the next, step after that, we do what we call all of the follow-up. So follow-up engagement, we have, all week we have folks out at outreach events and doing outreach. And so if we see somebody somewhere else, we make sure we have a follow-up engagement. We also follow behind notifications. So they notify on Fridays. We do have one case manager. She will go in with notifications if it's people she's already working with and they know her and they don't necessarily associate her with law enforcement. But if it's new people, she doesn't actually go in with law enforcement. But either way, we have Harold, one of our lived experience workers. He will go in behind notifications, and one of our other case managers, because it's traumatizing, right? Again, whether it's been the first time or the 100th time, it's traumatizing. It's a huge pain. Now they only have 72 hours to try and figure out what to do. And so we find that it's really helpful to have a follow-up after that. And again, offer help, offer those solutions. And then we also actually make follow-up appointments with people. So we will be back here at 1 on Monday to help you move. Or you said the last time you did this move, you lost your social security card. So let's make an appointment. Let's go get a new one. And just really try and use the opportunity to move forward and help people as best we can from kind of spinning in what just happened in terms of the notification to move. And then obviously collaboration with community partners is huge when you've got something like this going on. And Boulder is absolutely amazing at this. I feel like I don't have everybody up here that I could. But from the law enforcement side, because this is a legal thing, the homeless outreach team, so they're division of Boulder PD that works specifically with the unhoused population. They're definitely a critical partner. There are, some scenarios, though enforcement is getting pretty strict, where we can ask them to not notify somebody if they have, say, a housing opportunity. They also are willing to share locations. So if we're looking for somebody, they tend to know where everybody is. So they're actually a pretty good partner in this. I would say an excellent partner, actually. Then the community court / Boulder Municipal Court. So that's who gets these tickets, right? And they, on Thursdays, they have an outside community court, so we can collaborate with them to get people there to handle the tickets. They will also let us know if people have warrants, and they're actually really great if somebody is working, like actively working with a service provider team toward housing, and they're taking steps. So we're gonna take them to get their ID. The court will dismiss tickets, right, as long as those steps are being taken. And then the jail is another pretty critical partner to this. Oftentimes, if people are arrested, that disruption can lead to a lot of dysregulation, right? And so we need to make sure that, jail mental health is aware if there's any meds. We also need to be able to get in to see people. If documents are lost, the jail at times will order social security cards for us, and they have an ID place that comes in there. So even though, it's a difficult result when somebody ends up in the jail, you can take the opportunity and really make something come from it. And then, of course, the community partners, All Roads, I can't say enough about them. They have a really awesome housing-focused shelter, and then they also have the day service center, and we have an office at the day service center, and they help people with housing exits through the day center, as well as folks who are staying at the shelter. So for new people in town, referring them up to All Roads has been like a critical piece of this, because some of them may not have heard, or they've heard, you know, some confusing information. So really being able to utilize those services has been pretty amazing. And then outreach events, we have Streetscape, Feet Forward, and Deacon's Closet. And these are all big events where resources are provided. And Streetscape and Feet Forward are really helpful in that they will provide sleeping bags and tents. We can't because of the camping ban, and we receive a certain amount of funding from the city. So it is our policy that unfortunately we can't do that. But these organizations can, which is important to us, because even though I can't give someone a tent, I want to be mindful of the fact that they need that, and that's important, right? And then Deacon's Closet is just another space. It's where the community court is, and the service providers can go there. And then Clinica is the last piece. They provide a lot of medical assistance to people, and they up at the Ryan Wellness Center, people can use the phone, they can get their mail sent there. So again, just a really helpful community partner, and we need that when people are constantly having to move because of the ban. And then last thing, you know, just you kind of turn a negative into a positive, right? So the ban is an opportunity to build relationships. People are frustrated, and if you can come through and help them with a solution, that's actually a really positive thing. It's actually motivates a lot of folks to end their homelessness. It's annoying, it's pesky. They don't want to deal with it, and eventually they'll say, okay, I'm gonna, you know, go up to All Roads, and I'm gonna stay there, and I'm gonna really start working with Roberta's team, or they will really deeply engage with our team, whatever that looks like. And then of course, you know, exits to housing, right? So that can be these, you know, long-term PSH, or, you know, reunifications through diversion, whatever it is. So despite the fact that it's far less than wonderful for most people, there are some positive things that can come out of it. So that's the last thing I have. If anybody has any questions.
Feel free to raise your hand, or if you want to just jump off mute or throw something in the chat if you have a question. One thing I just appreciated from your presentation, Molly, was mentioning that we need to be advocates and not allies. So I will definitely take that away and just kind of use it in my work.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks. Yeah, I made a note of that, advocate but not allies. And can you explain that a little more? I'm not clear on what the difference is.
So, you know, the way we look at it is you advocate for somebody to get the best support that they need. So whatever is in their best interest. So in this situation with the camping ban, right, we need to help them move so they don't get a ticket. You know, preferably in an ideal space for me, they would go stay at All Roads at the shelter. But if not, we need to work out a way for that. You don't want to be their ally in that we don't want to take their side, right? So you're going to get a lot of, you know, F the police, and this is unfair, and I shouldn't have to do this. And if you start becoming their ally and saying things like, oh yeah, the police are terrible, I can't believe this, that's so unreasonable, you're right, just stay there, man, that doesn't achieve any greater good. right? They're not working toward long-term solutions. They could end up arrested, have bad interactions with police. So really it is to advocate for what's in their best interest, have compassion, but not jump on the train of, oh yeah, you're right, let's rally against the police and this ordinance. Even though we don't love the ordinance, right? But it just does no good in that situation. To rally against it. Now, if we want to collect feedback for city council at a different time, that's totally different. That's advocating, but yeah. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, that's so working within the system that's there, fair or not, or just or not, or easy or not, work within the system that you have, looking out for the person's immediate and long-term interest, as opposed to just being pissed off.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, got it. Sometimes it does bring about change, but not every
It does in the right spaces. Yeah, we have to do the same thing with our jail folks. They struggle a lot with deputies in the jail, and it is not in their best interest to like align with them against the jail while they're there, right? But yeah, you're right. In the right spaces, protesting, letters to city council, whatever it is, there are ways to do it for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Alrighty, I'm not seeing any other hands right now, but feel free to, pop questions specific to Molly in the chat, and she can definitely respond to you there, or we can just use that as a holding space for the conversation in a little bit. Thank you so much for sharing and just keeping a bit of a positive and maybe just grounding lens to this work. I will now turn it over to the folks over at the Community Investment Alliance, wherever they are.
I'm right here. Thanks, Olivia. I'm curious, do you have my presentation or should I share my screen?
Oh, I was just looking and I don't think I got it shared, but if you're able to share your screen, that's awesome.
Let's see.
I might be able to give you permissions. Perfect.
Okay. Great. Is this showing up on everyone's screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Perfect. Thank you. So my name is Julia Conley, and I am a street outreach worker for Community Investment Alliance part-time in Durango. This presentation was actually put together by my supervisor, Kathleen Van Voorhees, who I think is a more normal attendant of these meetings. So it has pieces from both our like Durango side and then also the New Mexico side. I'm like less familiar with the New Mexico side, but there's some pieces on that just kind of as like a frame of, I know a lot about what I'm doing, but not necessarily like as broadly about our organization, but I'm going to do my best. So we have active outreach in both Colorado and New Mexico. So quite a range in the type of communities we're supporting, from urban to rural and frontier communities, which means like in some areas we have services, but they're harder to navigate. Whereas like in the rural and frontier areas, people are much more isolated without shelter options or transportation, and sometimes even access to basic food or medical care. In response, our team is flexible, mobile, grounded in consistent presence. We're not just visiting once, we're showing up again and again, with the hope of building trust over time. And we also respond to emergencies. That means sweeps, weather events, or any form of crisis, and helping people navigate complex systems like coordinated entry, Medicaid, SNAP, getting an ID, which can be nearly impossible without support, phones, consistent access to like charging things. And we also hold a one size does not fit all model and try to like be very responsive to exactly what our community's landscape is and the culture of different people in that area and shape our outreach based on those needs. Basically, like our whole goal is to bring the system to the people and not expect people to try to come to the system. And here are the best practices that guide our work. And I'm sure like many of y'all are very familiar with these things, but yeah, really strongly believe in the housing first approach, which is incredible because we have, at least here in Durango, we have a bridge program, and believe it's really hard to find housing without being sheltered, and try to offer that to as many people as we can within the limits of what we have. Also, of course, culturally responsive care, especially I could speak to in Durango where there's deep historical trauma like indigenous communities or generational poverty in rural towns. We listen and we learn before trying to like quote fix what's going on for people and prioritize person-centered navigation. Like I was saying before, we don't push people into one size fits all and just ask like, what do you want for yourself? And like, what are your goals? And we're also very deeply involved in coordinate entry, and make sure those who are often excluded from housing lists because they don't have a phone or not good at making appointments, or are not aware of coordinated entry, like we bring that to people on our street outreach missions. And also are constantly building partnerships with service providers, law enforcement, churches, hospitals, because we understand collaboration is key. And we also try to integrate lived experience into our model. We have like a lived experience advisory board of people who are kind of on the spectrum of like actively experiencing being unhoused to having had that in their recent past, and like use their guidance to guide what we're doing. And what is also unique about the La Plata model is we have boots on the ground across the country every day. Our teams doesn't wait for people to come to a service provider or clinic. We go to them wherever they are. Riverbeds, encampments, parking lots, back roads. We try to make our presence as consistent as possible. And something else that's unique about the La Plata area is our ability to respond immediately when urgent situations arise, whether it's a sudden sweep of an encampment, emergency weather events, or a call from law enforcement about a vulnerable individual. We're there. And this kind of presence matters. It's not just about handing out resources. It's about showing up when people are at their most vulnerable and being calm, trusted face in moments of crisis. And we also partner directly with local providers and have developed strong relationships with the police department and the sheriff's office, which is really key in our area, with just like certain areas being under city jurisdiction and other areas being under county jurisdiction, and people camping in both areas and it being very close. So having partnerships with both is really important, and allows us to prepare, support, and advocate for those affected. And we know that enforcement outcomes can be mixed. These partnerships give us something invaluable, a seat at the table. They allow us to speak with officers and deputies in a trauma-informed, culturally aware way about what's really happening on the street and what people actually need. And this doesn't solve everything, but it does give us a chance to influence decisions, reduce harm, and create more humane approach to crisis response.
We lost you for a second, Julia. You're frozen, but hopefully you can hear me. Give you a second to refresh, because I'm sure we are all familiar with this. It looks like hopefully she'll make her way back. Let me open my email just in case. I think we need some like Jeopardy hold music. If anybody wants to volunteer. Fortunately, I don't think I have her direct email. Let's see. I'll give her another minute while I try and see if her emails are neighborly. Oops. If she isn't able to hop back on, I'll definitely still add in that presentation and make sure that gets shared out with all of you as well.
I for sure have her email if you need it. Julia's.
Oh yeah, would you mind just sending it
Totally.
or dropping it in the chat? Awesome, thank you so much. Okay, well we will just shift gears and I'll send her a note. And she can chime in to our discussion. So I know I've scheduled this for an hour and a half just because sometimes we run out of discussion time, but obviously if you can't stay on for that whole time or if we are losing steam, you know, we can wrap up when we feel like we are ready to. But we will shift gears into our open conversation portion. I have a quick prompt for you. Hopefully you all can see the little emojis at the bottom. If not, then it should be under the more options or somewhere kind of on the bottom of your window. So just kind of wanted to get a second pulse check from you all to see. Please share an emoji, whichever one feels right. If you do have some form of a camping ban or camping restriction in your community, just so we can kind of get an idea of what's happening. Yeah, a lot of people. Seems like everybody, which I'm not surprised. Because even just doing a quick, Google, you can see there's so many communities in Colorado alone that have camping restrictions. So I like to come to these meetings with, prompts just to kind of get the juices flowing, get the thoughts flowing. But I think this is a super relevant topic to everybody. So, if you have other thoughts or other questions or other kind of pieces to this work that you want to talk about, please just chime in. And I'll throw those up on the screen. We have kind of a smaller group today. Sometimes we have more than this. And so I like to make sure that there's space for folks to feel comfortable talking, but I'll kind of leave it up to you all. If you want to give me another emoji, I guess, if you would like to split into some smaller breakout rooms for discussion. Maybe like would be a few breakout rooms. Paul, you get your own. Okay. Well, since we only got a couple, we can just kind of keep the space open and chat here. So I'm gonna drop just my, well, I'll share my screen again. And these again are just prompts. So feel free to use the chat, use the hand raise, come off mute, because I'd love to just hear your thoughts, how you navigate this in your own community, in whatever way you do. Yeah. Paul, I'm going to put you on the spot because I can see you. How does this look out your way? Paul works for Hilltop out in the Montrose, Grand Junction region, Western Slope there.
Yeah, so mostly affecting Montrose. Well, the ones that I'm most involved with are Montrose and Delta. So it was last year when Montrose, it was right after Grant Pass, that the Montrose City Council voted 5-0 to put in place a camping ban. Even though basically 95% of the people in attendance were against, and basically asking them could they wait until after winter to put this into effect. They still voted it in 5-0, which was unfortunate, but back to like, I don't know, somebody else had mentioned in the previously, like the positive that came from that is that it was much more on everybody's, all the providers. It was much more on their radars, as well as the community, basically to come together. So there was a little bit of a creation of this group that's calling itself the Montrose Unhoused Solutions Group, who have been trying to work with all of the different groups to try to find out some solutions for people. So unfortunately here though, we only have shelter in the wintertime. So our shelter opens in November and runs through April. So there is no 24/7 shelter. And so, and they are limited space. So there's a room for about 30 people in the Montrose shelter. And I think Delta is about the same. So it doesn't necessarily cover all of the people that we need to have housed during the winter. So one of the responses from that was that the United Methodist Church in Montrose actually started letting people camp in a back lot that they have. They try to set it up so that people were basically vetted. The church program agreed. They sued them, and the city lost in municipal court, and then the city fired the municipal judge, and then now it's in district court, even though at this point the encampment that was there has disbanded. People moved out, and we helped them out and helped get everybody to where they needed to go. And the city still remains that they're going to sue them in district court for the fines and fees, which has been kind of an issue. yes, they did have some fines and fees, related to fire codes and some things like that. And at this point, it seems just punitive on the city's effect. It's really hard to remain in that space to not jump to like the negative on that. I think, Molly, you mentioned that when you were talking about like still having to try to work together, even though there are these things that are happening, which, sometimes it takes a minute before we can get there. And, like to sit and think and to kind of just make sure that we are being like the best advocates that we can be, even in situations that seem strained. It takes patience, I generally try to not jump to the negative, but sometimes it's hard when we have city people that are the city kind of doing opposite of what we're trying to do. It's hard to remain in that space, I would just say. So definitely working on my own patience with that whole thing is definitely a growing experience for sure. And we'll continue. But like I said, the positive is that it was on people's radar. People have come together. There's a little bit more action that's happening. Right now, the people that have disbanded from the encampment are out in public lands. And, we have communication with our BLM rangers and some folks, and we're trying to keep it, make sure we're trying to help out with trash and water and just all of the basic necessities, along with trying to make sure that people understand and know that there's potentially options for housing, getting them into coordinated entry, trying to work with them as much as possible. A lot of them, it's a little bit further away, which just makes that a little bit harder. And I like the piece that the last lady was talking about, how we're like, we're not waiting for them to come to us, we're going to them, basically. Available. Yeah. All right. I think that's kind of where I'm at. Some good and some not so good. But our hope is that we can maybe if we can talk with a new city council person coming in, that we can maybe next time there's a vote on some of this stuff, maybe it's not 5-0, maybe it's 4-2, or I think it's going to just take some time for us to advocate and stay on top of some of that. Hopefully next time the vote could potentially be a little different.
Go ahead, Julie.
Sorry again, everyone, that I cut off. I did not realize because I had my screen all the presentation, but just to speak to Durango, the camping ban just makes outreach, the follow-up outreach component, really difficult, because just because you see someone one place one day, they're probably going to get pushed along. And also it's pushed people really far out. And in our town, it's like we're kind of like surrounded by hills. And so people are camping like more and more, like requiring a hike and like managing bears, or just managing like, oh, if I leave my place, then my camp is going to be destroyed by animals. And this like kind of catch-22 of like, I need to leave to get food, but then if I leave, then the food I have is going to get destroyed. And so like people making kind of these like wilderness-esque decisions, and it's been really isolating. And I've seen kind of a spike in like helplessness, hopelessness, and suicidal ideation with the camping ban. And I think key factors is like Durango is so branded as like a tourist destination in terms of like, Molly, it stood out to me speaking to like clearing downtown. There's definitely like way less enforcement, or like out of sight, out of mind. I've actively heard a ranger tell somebody. And like if someone's by the river, like there's swarmed. I went to a sweep for like the sweetest guy, and there was 14 officers there to clean up his stuff. And it's just like, shocking, and it's just very obvious the amount of trauma that's being like forced upon these people over and over again. And we have a shelter, but we don't have any safe camping place. Like there is BLM land, but people are told to leave pretty immediately when there's like suspicion of like living versus camping. So definitely a lot of bias and profiling happening in our community. And then in terms of like advocacy, I worked with rangers over the winter, which was effective of like, hey, like I need to be able to find these people so they're not freezing to death, and like need to be able to get them propane for their tents. They cannot have their stuff destroyed. And we were able to have like one encampment last for like 3 months, and then another one last for another 3 months. And then it kind of always comes to like law enforcement seeing more like this attracts bad actors. And so we have to shut it down to stop attracting those type of people, which is really unfortunate. So I feel like a lot of my work has been just like not looking at speaking to law enforcement and speaking to city council is like, this is just not a monolith population. These are just like, it's not a problem. It's just like a series of really incredible people who all need different types of support, and explaining too, just there's so few opportunities. Like we have one PSH unit in town that has like about 30 rooms, 35 rooms. And so just like the pathway to getting people housing, if they're like struggling with substance use or have a TBI or have a disability, just like the reality of like, hey, this probably will take this person 4 to 5 years and they're a part of this community, and how can we continue to like show that they do belong? Yeah, those are my answers to those. Thanks.
I know there's some folks. Oh yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, so I'm fairly new. Well, I'm really new to housing. I was in other things where I dealt with compliance. But it sounds like the camping bans don't really solve the problem. They just kind of disperse the problem, which probably increases everybody's costs, right? Makes it harder to find the people that do need the services, probably increases the budget for housing them in the legal system, being arrested, having to process them through the courts, etc. Disrupts their, I guess, whatever path they're on to obtain services, because when they're removed from their living situation, they lose their documentation, their connections. Harder to find for you who might be working with people that you don't know where to find them anymore, or else they just move to another place that might be deemed as safer. Is that right? Close, off base? Okay. All right. Quick question though. So, well, never mind. I think I answered my question. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Jeff, I know we met maybe a couple weeks ago, and you were pretty new to Urban Peak, but do you see this happening, or like how do you see this impacting the youth population? And similarly, like other folks who are here, how does this impact youth experiencing homelessness? Or
I don't have enough experience with youth for that subset of the larger homeless population or unsheltered population to have an opinion on it. And I haven't spoken with enough folks around here enough to get a sense of how that's impacted. You know, Mayor Johnston in Denver just had his second State of the City speech yesterday. And one of the accomplishments that was pointed out was I didn't hear it, so I'm paraphrasing the paragraph I read on it in the news. But it was the lack of visibility of encampments, the large ones that were on the street before he took office, during that period of 2019 through 2023 when he took office. So yeah, it's been reduced. Denver bought some housing, older apartment buildings or motels in have helped that way. So there's not as much visibility, although the people, yeah, they're not in the elements anymore. I guess that's the benefit. That's a benefit, definitely. But there hasn't been much of a reduction in homelessness as a whole from the reports I've read. There's still a great number of homeless families out there, but they're just not as visible because they have shelter. I don't know if that's much of an answer, but that's the sense I'm getting from what I've read and being around the people who worked in it for a lot longer than I have.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, we're in kind of a difficult scenario with our youth population up in Boulder. One of the first victims of the federal funding cuts was actually our youth shelter. So it was the safe space where people under 18 could go, and really those 18 to 24, right, where the adult shelter is just a little bit much for them. And that included their outreach team. So prior to that, we had a specific youth related outreach team. And now we don't. So we are looking, and
We do now, Molly.
we do.
They came back yesterday. Yes.
Okay, never mind. Sorry, guys. I didn't know they came back. So that's awesome. So never mind. I guess scrap it, because I was gonna say, yeah, we were struggling because we were approaching them with a very adult-based model. So Heidi, tell us more about that. When did they come back?
Yesterday.
Sweet. Is it Kate again?
Yes, it's Kate. Kate's back.
Yay. You just made my day.
Oh, I'm glad.
Tell us more, Heidi. What does that look like for you?
For me, we have youth outreach back in our outreach collaborative.
So I can speak a little bit to what they do, assuming it's the same. So they will target essentially the TAY population, right? Those who are going through the transitional youth. But they are also, specifically qualified to work with anybody under 18, which is really, really, really tricky because there are so many different things that are going on when a child is involved. And so they will do street outreach. They'll go notifications. So Heidi, we may get to see them Friday. They will go notifications. They will do pick count, all of the different, they work with all of the outreach groups, but we really, when we identify youth, we do our best to simply transition the youth over to, then it was Together. Heidi, is it still Together, or is this a new team?
No, it's still Together. I talked to Annie yesterday.
Okay. Awesome. So to transition them over to the Together team, who can really specialize that way. In particular, I will say again, like kind of circling back to these camping bans, young people don't care. So it can be challenging to teach them like the longer term consequences, right? If you continue to kind of, stay out here and do your thing. And I certainly remember being that age, and I was the exact same way, right? I didn't really care what law enforcement had to say. And so, yeah, this team is really, really good at working with them and connecting them with different resources. So Heidi, I'm very excited because they were a huge part of our camping tickets, was that population for sure.
Christina, from La Puente, do you still in Alamosa have that designated encampment space, and what does that look like combined with camping restrictions, and how are you navigating that? What are you seeing from participants when you're connecting?
Yeah, we still are very, very fortunate to have a city sanctioned camp space in Alamosa, which, I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but it seems like it's one of the only ones left in the state. But they did recently start, they have like a lot of rules to stay there, and they really started enforcing them somewhat stringently after the grants pass decision. So we have had a lot of folks who were not able to stay within those rules, and the camping ban has really impacted them down by the river, just kind of like a lot of my folks just getting kind of chased in circles. And then like I put in my comment, our engagement specialist, Matthias, he has really had to think outside of the box of how to tell people, like, it's me from Street Outreach. You can come out from their campsites. And that's been a huge barrier, is people just not really, like, they're finally found a good spot, well hidden, and then so they just disappear from services because they don't want to leave that spot. So that's really how yeah. Oh yeah, Erica just got to hang out with Matthias yesterday. So so that's really how it's impacted us. Like I said, super duper thankful we still have the city sanctioned campground. It just doesn't, a lot of our folks don't really fit within the walls that they've that they want the folks that are stay there to be within.
What are some of those like higher barriers that are, restricting folks from either being allowed to stay there or even wanting to stay there?
There's a huge thing for folks who had more than who had anything outside of one tent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like one tent, and everything was supposed to be inside of that tent. I think they've lessened up and let some people have an additional storage tent, but that's been a little bit hit or miss, honestly. Like, some people seem to be told they can't have that. Some people seem to be told they can. I'm not really sure, excuse me, what that is. But so just things, a lot of our folks have lost all of their belongings many, many, many times. And that typically, in my I'm not a therapist or anything, but it does seem to kind of encourage hoarding behaviors. So a lot of our folks really struggle with only being allowed to have that small stuff. And then just any law enforcement interaction can really be considered a reason to be removed from the camp. So I know somebody was removed because they were accused of stealing a cell phone. Somebody was removed because they were unable to speak respectfully to law enforcement, things like that.
Dang. Who, I know you said that this was a city sanctioned encampment. Who kind of oversees managing that? And if it is, law enforcement, city officials, how does that impact, trust and your ability to engage folks either there, or I know you kind of spoke a little bit to really having to make your presence as an outreach worker known, but
yeah. Well, and that's really when we're out along the non-sanctioned camp sites that we have to be very clear and gentle and careful. Excuse me, sorry. The camp is owned by the city and managed by the city. The day-to-day for that is our community service officer, so the part of law enforcement that typically does code enforcement, I believe. They go out there every day. I'm not sure if the camp is on the police officers' rounds daily or not, but the community service officers are out there at least once a day. And yeah, it's been an interesting relationship, trying to advocate for our folks, while also, our folks definitely lose trust in us once they see us talking too much with law enforcement and city officials. just because of the yeah, just because of the dynamic there. So just thankfully we have a multi-person team, so I can handle a lot of that conversation with law enforcement and other city officials, and my teammates can distance themselves more or less from that, and hopefully keep some of that trust that we work so hard to build with our folks.
That sounds like a common theme that comes up is just really trying to navigate that component of trust when things like camping bans are enforced. Greeley folks, I know we just had a new camping ban enforced or passed by city council that just I think came into effect early June. And I know you shared a little bit in the chat, but if you'd be willing to share just kind of how that's impacted your work since that's been enforced and what's kind of shifted and how you're navigating that.
Hey, Olivia. Yeah, so about what I kind of popped in the chat, we did have a lived experience group recently talking about how it is affecting, the camping ban is affecting them, and what kind of supports we could offer, like as far as shelter, since we technically can't offer shelter, since our seasonal shelter is not yet open and it is the only one that is low barrier in our community. And so a lot of folks talked about transitional housing and how there wasn't enough of that, and that they could potentially be open to any type of transitional housing, but they weren't aware of all of the resources. So that did open the door for us to say, like, well, there are a lot more transitional housing for men that you might not be aware of, but also what other resources are you trying to look for? So it was nice for us to be able to have that conversation of, well, we can't offer you immediate shelter, but what's second best option, and possibly get the ball rolling on that. But yeah, we did get a lot of feedback about how it'd be a lot safer for folks to just be able to sleep outdoors in their preferred area where they felt safe versus possibly going to spaces where there's more gang violence or they're more prone to victimization because of the surrounding area. So it was an interesting conversation. We did try to talk to everybody about, well, what are your options? What's the next best step? And we kind of navigated it from there.
Thanks for chiming in. What does advocacy look like for everyone? Do you feel like you have the capacity for it? I know some organizations have branches and teams kind of built in, and sometimes staffing is small, so you're kind of trying to do all of it at once. So yeah, curious what advocacy you're able to do, and what you would like to see, and then what is the response to that? I can speak a little bit to the recent Greeley camping ban enforcement. They actually had some public sessions notifying folks and kind of a share out of here's what this would mean. What are your thoughts? And there was a lot of direct service folks who came to those meetings, and there's one or two public meetings, and a lot of service folks were really opposed to it. Just, I think, similar thoughts to you all have shared. Makes connecting with folks harder, breaks down trust. Where are they going to go if there isn't some other space? Like, you're just, shuffling people around in circles. And despite that being kind of the main conversation in those meetings, City Council still voted to continue on with the camping ban, which I was very disappointed by. And yeah, I'm not, now working at DOLA, I'm not super involved with the advocacy around that. But as a community member, I was able to attend and voice my opinion there. Yeah. But curious if there's been similar public meetings, or again, like advocacy groups for or against, I guess.
We've had, so one of the solutions we tried in Boulder was, or we have in Boulder, was the day center. So that was a space, right, where people could go with this camping ban and be there during the day, and it was designed to alleviate it. And we had to answer a lot of questions. All Roads has a good neighbor agreement, so they have to speak to the neighborhood. We had to make sure we sent emails to city council to make sure that the day center stayed funded. And they came through. So I will say, they came through, but it's, and I know Heidi can speak to this too, even though she is technically the county, but as part of HSBC, she hears this a lot. But it's an ongoing thing, right? So it's every time there's an incident in one of the neighborhoods, we have to, revisit the day center. So it really is just an ongoing process. And I know a lot of us feel, I would say, frustrated, right? Like, you've already got this camping ban, and we need to be able to help these people exit homelessness and have some compassion for like these human beings. And now you don't want a place for them to be inside during the day, that's safe, where we can try and help facilitate some kind of exit from homelessness. So yeah, it's a pretty frustrating thing, and we have to keep going. And Heidi, I don't know if you have any thoughts either.
No, I think it's a balance, right, between community safety and supporting those that are unhoused in the most appropriate manner. And, as a county employee, we do hear about, things that are not on the up and up, and that doesn't help the situation. So, I think Boulder is not unique in the sense of like most communities kind of operate this way. And we're seeing a huge shift out of California right now. And I anticipate that will continue as things progress. San Francisco has really been in the news a lot lately about forcing shelter access. And I think that we're going to continue to see this trend, and it's a fine balance. And if this was easy and there was the answer, we would have solved it a long time ago.
But
Advocacy in Durango is looked like myself and the other street outreach worker working alongside the Lived Experience Advisory Board and having meetings with law enforcement and city council. And there's been like traction to have the meetings, and then just like a ton of pushback. Has been like what I've seen, just like more concern around trash accumulation and fire risk for camping than concern around like people's humanity and lives. So there's been like people will come to the table, and then in terms of like something actually changing, I haven't seen that yet. Like one shift is there's been much more movement towards having a emergency warming center that's only open on nights where the temperature's below 15 degrees. And this previous year it existed and it wasn't even you weren't even allowed to sleep in it. So hopefully this next year the city council has come behind, okay, yes, we do need this. And yet still it's like, it's such a low temperature. There's still no safe camping, no safe parking. And overarching just like big concerns around fire, especially after a much drier winter here.
Chris, I see you put a chat in about advocacy towards expanding capacity. I know you're in Lakewood. What does that look like right now for you? And is there momentum?
Yeah, a little bit about it. So I've worked in Lakewood a year and 3 months now. Before that, I worked for City of Denver over a decade, and so I've been in camping ban land for a really long time. One of the things that I think Denver's demonstrated is that there are conditions where people say yes on the other side of enforcement to something that's different, right? But that takes an immense amount of capacity that not every community can provide. So when I think about my efforts, I try to place them or hone them in on those opportunities. I think camping bans are becoming pretty par for the course. We all saw that all our communities, went into an explosion of yes, thumbs up affirmations when we were asked about that question. And I think, in terms of enforcement response, like it's not always a camping ban enforcement, right? Like if it's not a camping ban enforcement, the tip of the spear is a public health issue, or it's a encumbrance right-of-way issue, or it's a safety issue or something. And kind of speaking to Heidi's comment, I do think that there's a balance, right? Like it doesn't touch every community in the same way, but in urban settings, I've been in situations where encampments have been so thick and ungovernable that like our postal carriers have refused to deliver mail on those blocks, right? So I think it's never that there's absolutely no scenario where an intervention isn't going to be warranted for a county and bigger public capacity. But where I think I wish we'd explore kind of, well, what's the leverage we can draw in this context of having these camping bans to really, instead of situating the debate, try to fight against and push against the tide of the camping bans. How do we kind of redirect that flow towards the options and the capacity that we need? Here in Lakewood, we on the books we do have ordinances that are selectively not enforced, although we do at this point 48-hour notices at times. But part of that has been able to kind of call out our county for being in the situation many of us around the table are here, whereas like we didn't have a year-round shelter opportunity to direct people to. So in partnership with you, Olivia, and Dola, we're changing that. We're creating different options, right? And we're putting ourselves in that stress position to figure out the way forward to make sure that we do have facility-based resources and better options to bring people into throughout the year, not just when it's cold weather. And I think there is that exploration of the tension at the street level between whether it's our PD or our navigators on the street engaging people and the city kind of coming to terms with like, there's been increases in homelessness year over year. The future of this is going to require equipping PD and navigator teams with that place to bring people, has led to, for us, a $9 million acquisition and rehab project to create a trauma-informed environment that can fulfill that. So, so yeah, I mean, I just always wish that, you know, if we're going to drumbeat advocacy, that drumbeat really resounds around the need to do that resource development to find those longer term answers, whether they're housing first, whether they're transitional opportunities, whether they're sanctioned sites, encampment sites where people can go to, or in our case here, we're starting out with kind of semi-congregate shelter. I mean, I think the more we can kind of point the finger and start moving the flow in that direction, the better.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that there's some city buy-in to develop some resources, and I hope that that's kind of the momentum that continues to grow, because it's something that affects a lot of people in a number of different ways. Any lasting final thoughts, comments that folks would like to share? That's okay. Well, I do have a feedback form that I'll also email out to you, but this just helps to keep these conversations relevant. It's super helpful to get feedback and make sure that you know, we're talking about things that make sense for you all as service providers and people who are seeking funding for this work and all that jazz. So I'd super appreciate if you fill that out. It takes less than 5 minutes, and it's really beneficial for me to continue shaping these conversations. Yeah, I really appreciate you all being here and just sharing your thoughts. I know this is a tough topic, and I think one that is becoming increasingly more impactful in all of our work. So I appreciate you all sharing and trying to stay in the positive and the upward momentum of it. And thank you to Molly and Julia. I think Julia's been hopping in and out, but appreciate you sharing your insights. Yeah, I know this is hard work, so appreciate everything you guys do every day. And with that, I will let you all go. Thank you again, and I'll email this stuff out to you. So have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Olivia.
Thank you.